What's going on, everyone? You're tuned in to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and today's guest on the show is Alli Webb. Alli is an entrepreneur, New York Times best-selling author, podcast host, and the co-founder of Drybar, a chain of salons that solely provides a hairstyling service known as blowouts. She's also a founder of multiple other companies such as Squeeze and most recently Becket Quill. In 2010, Alli opened the first Drybar in Brentwood, California. Over a decade later and 150 plus locations across the country, Drybar has exploded into a nationally recognized and highly sought after brand. We spoke with Alli about what her childhood was like growing up in South Florida, where she gets her obsession with hair, the story of how Drybar came about, how she approaches fear and uncertainty, what it was like to transition out of her leadership role at the company, what she's working on now, and much more. Here we go.
I grew up in South Florida, so, the weather was bad. It was humid, and my hair is naturally curly, so it was a bad combination. And, I was like a pretty chill little kid. My brother, Michael Landau, who's my business partner, he was always the kind of overachiever in the family, and I was kind of always in, the background. I never got in trouble. I was really, kind of did what I was told, didn't cause a lot of problems. Michael got in trouble all the time. Him and my dad were always fighting, and Michael always thought he was smarter than my parents and everybody. So I feel like depending on the age, it's did you guys ever watch Family Ties? You remember that show? Mm-hmm. The Alex P. Keaton? That was my brother, very overachiever. And I was very just kind of, as my parents would have described me back then as a wallflower, but it's funny because I'm not like that now at all. But I was, I think I was kind of in my brother's shadow. And
right.
But, I bring up the hair thing because it really was a thing for me as a kid. I really didn't like my hair. And it wasn't even that I just didn't like it. It's I didn't know how to deal with it because I was just frizzy and big. And it was I could just leave it curly, which, now I've come to love my curls more. But then it was I was how do women how do women's hair not look like this? And I didn't know how to do it. And I was always kind of trying to figure it out. And I used to beg my mom to blow out my hair, and I tried doing it and it was always frizzy. And I just was really kind of enamored with hair. I think because my own was so unmanageable that just was it's just so funny looking back because it was just that thing that was I was just this nut that I was trying to crack for so many years, which eventually led me to beauty school and starting to do hair professionally. And obviously, eventually.
Did anybody make fun of you or anything for having curly hair or?
No, it was my own thing. It was my own. I don't think anybody, it's everybody had. I also, I was born in 1975. So I was in high school and I graduated high school in 1993. And that was in the 80s, was big hair. You remember the big bangs and all of that. So it wasn't even it was bad. I didn't like it, and I didn't feel put together when I would see girls with and I know I'm talking to two guys that this might be lost on, but for your audience, when someone's hair was really polished and blown out really nice, I loved that and I wanted that. As women, which of course you guys can appreciate, we kind of want what we don't have, and grass is always greener and all that stuff. And so,
I want hair.
Yeah, just in general.
That's what I want now. Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it wasn't that I was getting made fun of or anything. I just personally, it was something that bugged me about myself that I wanted to figure out. And fast forward to going to beauty school after doing a bunch of other stuff, I was this is what I was always meant to be, to do.
Would you notice other women that had similar hair situations and just wonder I wonder how they feel about their hair? What?
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was listening to a podcast today and someone was talking about silent suffering and sort of in a way where identifying, I guess, business opportunities that people aren't explicit about, right? It's sort of, subconscious. It's you wonder, what are people thinking about this particular situation that really is bothering me?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think there's probably a lot of that with especially living in LA, and it's where there, it's everybody's very body conscious and, so yeah, I'm sure. Well, obviously we know the answer to that question because Drybar was such a hit. It was I remember talking to my brother about it, who his wife has naturally straight hair, grows out of her head straight. It was the girls I hated in high school who had hair like that. And when we first started talking about this idea, he was like, I don't understand. Can't women blow out their hair themselves? I'm like, well, some can, but most can't. And, it was like, I had a feeling that I wasn't alone in my annoyance with my hair. And, and as it turns out, women who have straight hair want, curls and volume, and women who have curly hair want straight and sleek, more or less. And so, it turns out that this thing is something that is important to women. And what we learned, through growing Drybar was like women just felt better when their hair looked really good. And whatever good means is like subjective, and, it's different for everybody. But it was like this, it's like what I realized, which I don't think I realized pre-Drybar, was like there is this like confidence that women would get from having great hair, which I think I instinctively knew. And it was probably what, ultimately led me to Drybar, and the whole thing with my hair was like I felt more put together when I was like happy with my hair. It was like putting on a good outfit or having your makeup done, like a nice suit, whatever it is.
Yep.
And that we found out very quickly that was a thing that women were really drawn to with Drybars. Like they wouldn't go to a board meeting without a blowout, or a job interview, or a date, or whatever it was. They just had this extra kind of layer of confidence that they would get from great hair.
Alli, you talk about your brother kind of always being like, the smart one, or thinking that he's smarter than everyone. And you're kind of just I assume you were more, I could be wrong, but more introverted, at least in your family.
Yeah, as a kid, yeah.
When did you realize like this isn't necessarily like me? Like I'm not necessarily the quiet, introverted person. Like sure, like Michael can be as loud as he wants to be, and he could be as smart as he wants to be, but I'm also that way, you know? And I also want to kind of come out of my shell.
Well, I mean, I think it was, Michael, it was just, Michael's like superpower and strength is like he is a really smart, talented business guy with great instincts. And but taking it back, before Drybar, Michael and I had actually partnered in another business, Nicole Miller's, like when we both thought we wanted to work in fashion. And I was basically running these retail operations, and he was kind of handling the back end, but it really wasn't what either one of us want to be doing with our lives. And very long story short, it didn't work out, and we were both very unhappy. And it was a really good learning though for us. And I mean, like after that experience, my parents were like, you guys definitely can never work together again. And they were like, are you out of your minds, when we told them we were going back into business with Drybar. But that experience really taught us like what not to do and how to get along better. And, to answer your question, I mean, with Drybar, I knew so much about hair and blowouts in this world that I was very like armed with a lot of information and knowledge that Michael didn't have. And, he knew a lot about like leases and negotiating terms on things. And like I will never be a person that is interested or cares or wants to deal with like spreadsheets or financials. It's just not my thing. It doesn't get me excited and whatever. And it, it does for my brother. But I think the level setting of like, hey, this business doesn't work without my knowledge was like, it really leveled the playing field for us. And I think that enabled me to start coming out of my shell and having more confidence in myself, because I wasn't the overachiever and like the quote unquote smart one, but I yet had this like what would be the biggest success of our life idea. And, Michael very quickly realized that. And so the relationship, was really great because of that. And it was like in those first couple of years that I really started to like kind of flex that muscle and come out of my shell. And, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, that when we first had our first board together after we had raised a lot of money, I remember sitting in, now I was in a room with like a bunch of people like Michael, these like private equity guys, and they were all like Stanford and Harvard graduates, and like I didn't even go to college. And I did feel really intimidated in those early meetings. And then I used to like text my brother under the table like questions, because I was afraid to ask them out loud, because I was afraid it would be stupid or something. Right. And my brother's response was always like, that's a great question, you should ask it. And little by little, like through lots of things like that, I built the confidence. And then I started to realize like, again, this little idea that I had and this little thing that I thought would be great turned into this massive success. And that, really propelled me forward and gave me confidence. And what I lacked in, traditional education, I really made up for in like on the job training. And I learned so much over the last 11 years building Drybar.
When you were younger, were there any people around you, perhaps it was family, friends, or friends of friends that were entrepreneurs where
My
you saw
parents.
them, your
Yeah.
parents, yeah, where you
Yeah.
like kind of saw that early and it was a possibility for you in terms of your future?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that I didn't realize, I think when I think back of my like, my growing up and all the jobs I had like in my 20s, I think they all like very uniquely prepared me for where I ended up. But yeah, my parents were entrepreneurs. They had their own business and it was called Flips, and it was like a little old lady schmata clothing stores, and it was actually pretty brilliant because it was like you know, I don't know if you've heard of like Chico's, but Chico's is like, it's a pretty well known like older lady clothing store, which is really what my parents' store was, but not quite as nice. But pre Chico's, the only place that women had to shop, older women, was like department stores. And my parents very smartly realized if they were to open Flips, was my dad's nickname, and my dad's dad had been in the schmata business too. They realized if they opened these little Flip stores in these retail these like shopping centers, strip malls in South Florida, which is where we were living, which had like the bagel place and the dry cleaner and a little grocery store and a Chinese store, like everything that these women wanted to do, and the little trolley would take them over from the senior citizen center. Like that's what Del Rey and Boca was like. So my parents opened this store. It was a huge success, and my dad, which again, all of these lessons definitely like sunk in as a kid that I didn't realize they were. But my dad used to put like chairs at the front of the store for like the little old men, the husbands to sit, and he'd bring them coffee and orange juice and the newspaper and bagels, so they would feel comfortable and they would be happy. And the longer they stayed chill, the longer their wives could shop, the more money they'd spend. It was genius,
Very smart.
And and my parents also had this incredible, bend over backwards for the customer. The customer's king. And, as like, older people tend to be a little bit crankier and crotchety and whatever. And they were very much like that. But my mom, who was really more running the store, she was so patient with them and she was so kind to them. And I always was like, Mom, they're such assholes to you. Like, why are you so nice to them? And it was really like a lesson that it was like annoying to me at the time, but I remember her saying like, these people are paying our bills. This is how we can afford the life we have. Doesn't matter. It's not personal. You don't take it personally. And she, and so there was like a million of those lessons I learned because Michael and I worked at the store. We used to like ticket the clothes, and I personally liked working at the cash register, probably taking the money. And it'd be like, it was so busy that there'd be like a line, and like somebody would be folding and somebody would be taking the tickets apart and someone would be ringing. My parents had like an old fashioned register. I mean, this is 40 years ago. I don't know. So yeah, that was like my first, like I grew up in that world, of like learning customer service. I mean, the one thing I didn't learn from my parents, which I learned later in life from my ex-husband, was like the branding. My parents did not pay attention like to the branding, the experience, the customer service, that was all there. Everything else, I mean, they thought we were out of our minds when we told them it was going to cost like $500,000 to build a Drybar. They're like, what? But yeah, I learned very early on, and that was just like, that was my childhood, watching my parents operate a business, and they were very successful at it.
When you were doing that in those days and, manning the cash register and you're in the store, did you ever think, I really like this. Maybe I want to do this for when I grow up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was that a thought that you had?
I don't really think it was.
Right.
I don't think I ever thought about like being an entrepreneur or having my own business ever until I was much, much older. And even because I went from working at my parents' store to moving to New York, and I always worked for other people, and it never even it really didn't occur to me. I didn't have this like lifelong dream of being an entrepreneur just because my parents were, it was really something that came later in life, and it was like always there. I just didn't it was like dormant, in me, this entrepreneur. And now it's like I can't imagine it any other way, but I worked for other people. I liked working for other people. I was an assistant for a long time. I liked that because I was very much, and I'm still like this. Like I like making things happen. I like checking things off my list. Like I'm that kind of person, and it wasn't until I was older that I, probably in like my mid 30s, like I started a dog walking business when I was living in Cam and I lived in San Francisco for the first year of our marriage or maybe the second year. And I didn't know what I wanted to be doing. And at that time I've already been a hairstylist for a long time. And I had, done a couple other jobs like in PR, and we moved to San Francisco, and I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But and I had gotten married, and he was working, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna start having babies here soon. So what do I want to do? And I started a dog walking business, and that was probably my first like foray into entrepreneurship. And I remember very distinctly. I mean, I loved dogs, and so I wanted to like do that. And Cam made me a cute little website, and people started calling me, and that was like the thrill of it for me when people started calling me and I started getting business. And then I was like, and then I was like walking up to like 8 or 9 dogs at a time, which was like, and I had like a convertible Volkswagen Bug. I mean, it was such a shit show.
Classic cars that
I mean, I cannot believe I didn't take more pictures of that because I used to stuff dogs in that car.
Yeah.
But it was fun, but I was so bored because I'm just like with dogs all day.
No one's talking to me.
No one would talk to me. I used to call Cam like all day long because I was so bored. But I was like, that was the first like real entrepreneurship thing that I had, kind of dipped my toe into. And again, I loved the building of that business. I didn't love the job.
Right.
And so, you did that, but even before you mentioned going, beauty and fashion and being interested in all these things. And for someone who was like ambitious, just like even, in your childhood and growing up, did you have like one particular sort of vision for your career or life that like, this is what I'm meant to do or what I want to do, as opposed to, I'm interested in this right now, and then you're just kind of jumping around. Like, did you have a clear vision at all?
I did not. I really didn't. I mean, I did jump around a lot, and I always went from like thing to thing that like felt good and right to me at the time. Which I don't know if that's like the greatest piece of advice to give people. Although I think, for me, it was important, and it continues to be important. And I think it's how my life has evolved is like, I've gone and I've done the things that I enjoy, that like get me excited, that are fun to me. And I think that a lot of people actually don't do that. They kind of do what they, quote unquote should do or something, or there's some sort of path they should take that society, I don't know. But for me, no, I didn't. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I've never been that person. There was really no business plan for Drybar. I had like kind of stumbled into doing this mobile blowout business when I became a stay-at-home mom, and I was home with my 2 boys. And after about like 5 years of that, I was like, oh my God, I have to get out of the house again. It's like, what can I do? And so I started a mobile blowout business, and then very quickly realized there was a hole in the marketplace, and I should maybe turn it into a brick and mortar instead of, traveling. And so that's how Drybar happened. And even though we had an inkling of an idea that this might work and be really great, Michael had a full-time job. Cam was, a creative director at an advertising agency, and it was which is very much like how I've always kind of rolled. It's like I'm just doing what I love to do.
Right.
And again, I think that like that's probably not, that probably doesn't like work or feel right to some people. I've never been like a big planner.
A lot of it comes down to being able to like manage fear and uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
Like, cause that is what it is. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen, and you're taking a big risk. Like you're kind of going off the sort of path that is sort of almost laid out for you. Like, this is what you want to do. Here's the blueprint. Go to get this degree, get this job, and work your way up. Like, and this is so uncertain, and there's just a lot of ambiguity. So like for you, I guess, I mean, if you can remember, and even maybe now, like, how do you manage that? Do you have like some sort of approach or intention behind it, or are you just naturally that way?
I think I'm just naturally not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of. I'm a very decisive person, and I'm very like quick with like, I know what I like, I know what I don't like, I know what I want to do, I know what I don't want to do. Like I don't like fluctuate a lot in that space. And I mean, even now, jumping way ahead, it's like Drybar's 11 years old. I'm not really as involved anymore as I used to be. And we've started other businesses. I just started a jewelry company called Becket Quill. And that is like, talk about like, it is so out of my wheelhouse, but I'm like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to try it and see what happens. And I mean, of course, like, I'm sure there's, expectations that like, oh, can it be as successful as Big and Drybar? Probably not. And I don't really care about that, and I didn't really care about that when I started Drybar. It was like never, which I think is an important thing to point out. It was never like, oh, let's build this big business and like make a lot of money. And not that like making money isn't important, but I don't think it should ever be the
reason,
like the goal to like, you know, and I understand because I like nice things, and I grew up in like my parents had, you know, money at different times in their life, so I was exposed to that at different times, but never like, you know, anything crazy. And I think that I've really been driven by the thing that I like to do versus by the thing that's gonna like, you know, the rocket ship to like, you know, being rich. You know, it just was never a thing for me, and I think that that's also it's just an important thing to point out, because I think people kind of get into certain businesses or areas for the wrong reasons, you know, because they think it means this or that versus like it's what they love.
You mentioned something about, you know, your path earlier and how maybe that's not the best advice, but I actually disagree. I think it is the best advice that, you know, not having a linear life usually ends up, I mean, I don't know the statistics, but just from what I know, I think usually ends up in your favor, because you get to experience different things, you get to meet different types of people, you get to be part of different industries, you get to be part of different jobs. And from all of that, it becomes like at the end, like this amalgamation of all your different experiences and the things that you've been, you know, the things that you've learned, and you do get more confident, right? You know, once, you know, the person that is like, oh, I don't know if I want to be an entrepreneur, suddenly you're like, oh, I can do that. Like I've seen 7 entrepreneurs operate, and frankly, they weren't anything special. Like, that's the bar.
Yeah.
I can do better than that.
Yep.
Right. And so you just kind of can take that leap. And I think the confidence and, you know, ability is really built through those experiences. And I think the best entrepreneurs are the ones that did not have any clue what they were doing. They worked at a movie theater,
because
and then
really
they worked.
nobody knows what they're doing.
They don't.
I mean, that's the big secret.
And nobody really knows what they like until they do the thing that they realize that they like.
And I'm sure you guys, you know, talking to lots of different founders and entrepreneurs, you realize that like nobody really, that's like the big, like, aha, like, oh shit, nobody actually knows what they're doing. You know, it's like, you know some things about some things,
right?
But nobody has all the answers.
It's kind of like if you knew what you were doing, that means it's been done before, because you had some sort of like baseline or roadmap or something to look at. So and you could argue that if it's been done before and you're doing the exact same thing, you're probably not going to be as successful as the person that did it right before you, right? So it's
I always say that like we obviously didn't invent blowouts, but we created a much better experience, price point, ambiance, all of those things around the blowout, you know, which I think is like a great place to start. There's so many things that I think like just as humans out there in the world that we love, that we were like, but you know, like your favorite restaurant or your favorite whatever it is, you go in there and you're like, I love this, but I wish it was like they did this, and I wish this was like this, you know, and there is the opportunity, you know, and that's, you know, we've done it with blowouts. We're doing it with massage now. You know, we just announced this other business, Okay Humans, which is like now we're doing it with therapy. There's just like tons of things out there.
So was it the experience that was sort of lacking, or was it like the inaccessibility of like, or was it all of it? Yeah, it
was all of it. I mean, it was like, you know, growing up, my mom used to take me to like her hair salon, which was like, you know, as I remember quite fondly, it was like she would get her nails done, her toes done, she'd get her color done, she'd do like all sorts of stuff. It was like a full service salon, and that's really how salons have been forever and ever.
Right.
And then it was like, you know, women would certainly get their hair just styled, and that has always been a service that's offered at hair salons. But, you know, what I realized, and part of this was like, you know, again, I so firmly believe everything happens for a reason. I went to beauty school in South Florida with the aforementioned little old ladies, and I would do, those same little old ladies would come to like beauty schools to get like literally a $2 blowout or like a $5 haircut. I mean, that's how beauty school is, because they're guinea pigs, really. But I had so many great conversations with those women, and I remember blowing out their hair and talking to them about how when they were younger, you know, they would go to the beauty parlor and they'd see all their friends there, and it was like a social thing. And again, I wasn't really paying attention to that. And then all these years later, when we started Drybar, I'm like, you know, there's the hair salons that offer blowouts, which was most of them. Their stylists didn't want to spend the 45 minutes blow drying someone's hair because the price point was lower than a haircut or color.
It was like a loss leader for their services.
It wasn't something that they wanted to spend their time on. So that behavior that like our grandmothers and grandmother's generation loved went away. It was like you were a full service salon. Nobody wanted to focus on blowouts. It was like almost like a waste of time and money. And so, it was like all of these things, it was like came together for me of like, why isn't there a place where women can go for a great blowout without all the pressure of cut and color and like all that shit and the smell and the blah, 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 all the things that happen in a hair salon, and make it like an experience where women can just like relax. All they have to worry about is like they're just getting their hair blown out. It's like a pressure-free environment. If we make it look and feel really awesome, and then it was like, oh, we'll add the movies on the flat screen TV, and we put a iPhone charger in there. It was like, what as a woman did I want?
Right.
These are all the things that I wanted.
Yeah,
that didn't exist.
clearly there was a big market for it because obviously it worked out for Drybar. But at the time, why don't you think these salons realized that? Was it just because it was kind of bundled up in like the service of this package of services that, they didn't, sort of see the value of one of those services?
Well, I think it was, yes, I think it was that. And also that I think that there just wasn't like, I can't tell you how many women over the years have come up to me and said, like, I had this idea and I didn't know how to execute it and I didn't know what to do. And it's a pretty daunting idea of a business because and this is where I think like ignorance is bliss comes to like serves me, which has been the case my whole life. Yep. Is that how do you make a business where you're charging just like $35 for a blowout? Like if you do the math on that, it's pretty tough. Your margins are really narrow. And when you add up like the labor and the rent and the towels and the like laundry list of things, it doesn't seem, to be doing like 30 to 40 blowouts a day, it's like an okay business. And, again, we weren't banking on this being like this massive business where I just wanted to have my own I really, truly just wanted to have my own little like salon, my blowout salon that was just blowouts, and it would be like my place, and that would be where I'd go, and I'd make like a nice little livelihood up. That was it, because again, that was what we thought. We thought it would be like 30 to 40 women a day, and at that number, we would make a little bit of money. What we didn't realize, which I really didn't know, that it was going to be more like 80 to 100 women a day, right, which was like a whole different ballgame. Now we're doing a ton of blowouts and we're like, holy shit, we're making a lot of money, because what we initially projected as like 30 to 40 blowouts at $35 a pop very quickly turned into like 80 to 100 blowouts.
Right, which yeah.
Yeah, and so I think back to your question, most salon owners, understandably, like if they can get $300 an hour versus $70 for a blowout, like all day long, they're going to do that. Why wouldn't they? Right. I just was like, most hair salons are usually run by hairstylists, like, the hairstylist open salons. And I understand, like, why would they do that? There's a much bigger opportunity to make a lot more money in an hour slot than there is to do blowouts. So, like, that whole idea seems like, no way, I'm not interested in that. But I was like, I didn't even, while I was coming up in hair salons and I cut hair for a long time, I loved getting through the haircut to do the blowout. And the blowout was just maybe because of my childhood and whatever. The blowout was what I loved even when I was cutting hair, because it was like, that's when the hairstyle really came to life. And that's when like the client got really excited because you could see it. And that was like the magic for me in hair. And so I wanted to just do blowouts. I didn't care about cut and color. I wasn't interested in it. I loved just blowouts. And so, another big question during that, ideation stage was like, will there be any other stylists out there that will also just like the styling part of it? And that was a massive question mark. And I didn't really know until I started like placing ads and literally had people come to my house to blow out my hair as a test to work at Drybar before there was a Drybar. And, it turns out that there are a lot of stylists out there that want to do that. I mean, we pre-COVID had 4,000 stylists working for us. And I would say we've probably trained about 10,000 stylists over the course of, if not more, over the course of the 11 years we've, grown this business. So there were so many unknowns, so many question marks about like, how does this business work? Is this model work? And we very quickly figured out that it did. But I think everybody else was kind of afraid to take that risk, understandably.
I remember when I was first listening to your story. I don't remember when it was. It must have been years ago. There was a name that stood out to me, John Sahag, that was like either a mentor of yours or like somebody that you looked up to. So the reason I knew of him was because Pat and I are both Armenian, and he's actually Armenian. And he's actually like Lebanese Armenian, where my parents are from. So he's obviously a known name in the community. What did you learn from your time with him that, you know, perhaps inspired you in that moment or in the later years when you did launch Drybar about, you know, about the business, about service, about hair?
Well, it's so funny. Nobody ever knows at this point John Sahag, because, you know, he died a while
10,
ago.
11 years ago. Yeah.
Probably more than that now, yeah. But when I was working in a hair salon in Boca, a guy named John Peters, he really taught me everything I know about hair and the way I blow dry hair. And again, it was another one of those experiences where he owned the salon. So I was his assistant, and, you know, I was really there to learn hair, but he was dealing with like shop issues all the time and all the other stylists. And so while, again, I wasn't really paying attention, I did learn all these things that got like stored away in my brain that I would then later take out when we started Drybar. So I really was like, I mean, I was like a sponge with John, and like I just admired him so much. And he loved John Sahag. And so he turned me on to him. And, you know, John Sahag was very much the pioneer of dry cutting, and he kind of started that trend. And so because John Peters loved John Sahag, I started following him. And then, you know, I don't know how much you know about him, but he was this really,
probably not as much as you.
Yeah, he was really cool. I mean, he was like this like very like kind of dark and mysterious guy, and good looking, and this famous hairdresser before hairdressers were famous. And not to mention, he did every celebrity. He had a cool salon in Madison Avenue or Fifth Avenue in New York. And I was kind of enamored by him, and I was very much in the hair world. And Tony and Guy was also a big deal back then, and they were also like the Muscalas are the big hair family, and I loved them. And they actually ended up interviewing me years later, which was also such a amazing full circle moment for me. But I moved to New York City, and the only place I wanted to work was for John Sahag. And I walked in that salon, and I was like, you know, I'm actually writing a book right now, which is like my memoir, and I talk a lot about this because John was a really big influence in my life. And he was the only person I wanted to work for. And ironically, his salons were very, very quiet and very zen. And like there was waterfalls that kind of went throughout them. And he had these massive greyhounds that were always laying around him. And I remember like, I was an assistant there, so I would be like washing the dishes in the back, and I would have like the water fully on, and he would come back and like put it to half on because he's like, you don't need it to be that strong. I mean, everything was very chill, and I wasn't like that. And so it was a really exciting time in my life, and I liked doing that. But it was actually around that time I must have been like, I don't know, 25, and I was working for him, and I kind of got a little like, ironically, again, disenchanted with hair, and decided I was going to, you know, I had a couple of friends who were working for Rogers and Cowan, and I was like, I think I'm going to go do that. And there was an opening in the music department for an assistant, and I was like, that sounds fun, which was like Paul McCartney and Janet Jackson and like really cool artists. And so I decided to do that. And I remember going and talking to John about it and saying, hey, I'm going to try something else. And he was like, I think you're making a mistake. You should stay in hair. You're really talented, and blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to go as like a true 20-something-year-old. I was like, no, I'm out of here. And, you know, unfortunately, John passed away before Drybar ever happened. Crazy. So he never got to see it, which I always felt like so sad about that, because I know he would have been really proud of me. And he was, you know, he was such a like an interesting point in my life, even though it was short. It was like a year of my life, you know, but he was, I mean, I've had some really great mentors in my life. And then, you know, going from working from John Sahag to then working in PR, which was also another really great stepping stone for me, because I was like writing press releases, and I was the assistant to a very important guy. I mean, he was like Paul McCartney's publicist and Jennifer Lopez. And you know, I think that's when I learned like professionalism. That's when I learned how to like compose emails. And that was, you know, not something that I cared about or thought about, but I was like working in a cubicle, and that was really fun for a while, and not a long-term thing for me, but another really important like foundational building block for me. And so, you know, it was just like another one of those things that I think really shaped me for, you know, being ready to be at the helm of a big company like Drybar.
So when you have this idea for Drybar, right? Did you like tell people about it, like friends, family, and like were they telling you you're crazy to do this? Because you mentioned ignorance is bliss, and in hindsight, you probably would have looked at it the same way, and you might have said, the margins are not very nice, like there's not a great business, like maybe I won't do this. But at the time, you just don't know any better. So I guess were people discouraging you to do it, or were they more encouraging you?
Yes and no. It was kind of a mixed bag. I was operating the mobile business, and so all of my clients. And I was only charging $40 to go to women's homes, which is, again, very, very inexpensive. Most stylists won't go for like less than $100 to someone's house, if not more. And, so I started like talking to them about this idea, like, hey, I'm thinking about like opening a salon that's just blowouts. And women just were like, that's fucking genius. You should do that right now. Men were like, what? What? They were so confused by it. And my brother pretty quickly got on board with it and wanted to help me. And he had money. He had worked for Yahoo. So he was going to initially, fund it and give me sweat equity, which is the first time I had ever heard that term in my life. And, but his friends who ended up later investing were like, your little sister, you're doing what with your little sister? Like, no, this is crazy. This is never going to work. And like landlords were very like, we've never heard of this concept. We had to personally guarantee that first lease in Brentwood. And so and it was in the middle of a recession. It was in 2010 that we opened the first Drybar. And I didn't really realize that. It's like back then I wasn't really watching the news much. I was so in my own little world. And I mean, I kind of knew, but and I was very much like at that point in my life, I was very on a strict budget. We lived in like an apartment and I was like, not really paying attention to it. But I did, know and feel like, listen, for $35, I think women will do this pretty frequently. It's like, I wanted it to be an affordable luxury. That was my vision on it. It was like, here is something that like levels the playing field for women everywhere. It's like, you can have that like red carpet look that you see in like Us Weekly just by going to Drybar. And like the things that are usually like reserved for celebrities and really wealthy, now women can do this and it's much more affordable. And that's what I had hoped for and thought would happen, which, it did.
You talked about, and I think a lot of people, when they see a business that they like and that they're like, oh my God, we had thought of this idea before, right? I can't believe someone's doing this. This was my idea 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They just exaggerate the hell out of it and they just act like they could have done it better, right? Why is it that you did it better? And why... And what did you do, right, to make it a success? Because there are those moments that people say, oh, actually, I did think of that idea a year or two ago. And maybe they started and they failed, or maybe they never started. What is the secret, or is there a secret to that success?
I think so. I mean, we've talked about that so much that I think there is a secret sauce. And, I think that I was like very uniquely qualified to do this, probably more than like most people, because when you hear my story, it's like hair and blowouts since I was a little kid have always been like a thing for me, so there's that. And then I went to school and became a stylist, and and it's funny because I've connected here and there with some people who used to work at John Sahag, and they're like, oh yeah, because what would happen, the way John Sahag, the method was like, you would come in with your hair like dirty and someone would flat iron it. Then they would cut it. Then an assistant like me would wash it and blow dry it. So I was doing blowouts all day long, and there was a lot of pressure because it was.
You were the closer.
Yeah, I was the closer. And because then John would look at it. And I used to have to blow out John's girlfriend's hair all the time, and I was so nervous. I was like bright red at the end because I was so scared of what he was going to think. But but it was like blow dry boot camp, and I had it's like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. Like I had that in spades, and I was like, and so when you think about that, and then my parents having their own business and like understanding customer service, and then I'm married at the time to this like creative genius and branding, like it's just like the stars really aligned for us. And so I think the secret sauce, which I 100% think we had, was like, I knew this business backwards and forwards and exactly what I wanted. And I knew hair, and I knew if someone was unhappy, and I knew if it wasn't being executed right. And I knew customer service. And, Michael and I had such a strong foundation in that like we had that. Right. So, and then it was like Cam, who had the creative was the creative mastermind. And then Josh Heitler, who's our architect, who's now our same architect for Squeeze and OK Humans and all these things that we've been doing. It was just like, you couldn't have, it would be really hard to duplicate that. And I remember in the early days when we first started doing interviews, and Michael and I were like, maybe we shouldn't because we would just say everything, and we were not we were just so excited to tell people. And I would talk to anybody and I'd tell them all the things that we did. Yeah. And we started to feel like, oh shit, is someone going to copy us? And everybody copied us,
right.
But nobody did it. And I really feel like humbly, nobody did it as well as we did, because they, it was hard. You couldn't have hired me, Cam, Michael, right. Josh, and paid. We didn't pay ourselves anything for years. It was like
you almost can't escape it, right? And we always talk about it. Like, good ideas are fleeting, right? Like, people have ideas all the time, but they might not be able in a place. Execute. Yeah, and for whatever reason,
right.
They might not know as much as the next person does, or they just might want to be. It just looks like a get rich quick scheme, or whatever it might be. It's almost like you're sort of in this position where all these things around you are like, these forces are like pushing you to do it, where you just can't not do it.
I mean, it really, I think it was Michael who said it initially. It felt like lightning in a bottle, because it was like, there was so much magic between all of us. And to your point, it was like, Michael was kind of at the point in his life. Michael was running like a real estate marketing company at the time. Cam had a big fancy job as a creative director. He was doing like Jack in the Box commercials and really cool stuff. But it was this time in our lives where we were all able to come together and do this. Had it been another time, or we didn't all live in LA at the time, probably wouldn't have happened. When it was like so many things aligning, and that maybe that part of it was good luck and fortune that we all happened to be at the same place in the same time, and we were able to do this at the same time. But the rest was like expertise and hard work. And again, it's like, if we would always talk about that. Like, what if somebody else came along and kind of ate our lunch here? But it was like, well, they're going to have to raise a lot of money up front to be able to pay what Cam is worth, what I'm worth, what Michael's worth. But we didn't have to pay that, because we were a family, and we were just doing it for the thing, not for the money, which again goes back to my earlier point. It's like, we did not take money for a very, very long time as we were growing this.
Right. And another part of my point was you almost have to also have this lens that you notice that's happening, right? Because again, you could be looking, at kind of the other people and what other people are doing, and just wanting to do X, Y, and Z because it seems like a good way to make money, or it seems exciting, right? But it's like you don't even realize what's around you or what's happening around you.
Well, and that was largely what was happening with the competition. I remember when the first Copycat opened down the street from us, and I would drive by low in my car, because not that anybody knew who I was, but I was checking it out because I was like, oh my God, they were getting ripped off, and it was almost time after time. And more and more and more started popping up. But just to your point, it was when you walk in Drybar, the mirrors are behind the stations, which largely came from my learning from my mobile business. I used to do women's hair in a setting like this, in their living room, where they weren't sitting in front of a mirror, which I also learned that women don't want to stare at themselves for 45 minutes in a fucking mirror and pick themselves apart. That let's watch a cool chick flick. It was there's lots of those things that nobody knew and understood, even though I would talk about these things publicly too. But I'll never forget walking in a Copycat, and they did have mirrors behind the stations, but they were too high. So it just they didn't get it while we were doing it. And that was what we learned, was people looked at Drybar this is such a great opportunity. Let me hire some hairstylists, paint some walls, get some blow dryers, and boom, I have a Drybar. It's you do not. And then it's the training that went into place from the stylists and to the people who worked there. It was all of it. It all mattered, and it was hard to duplicate what we were doing. It still is.
I think what people are probably mistaken, and I think they still do today, is that when I view Drybar, I view it as a hospitality company, right? It's not a blow drying company and hairstyling company. It's you're providing service. It just so happens to be that you're doing hair, right? You could easily do something else, right? And I think that that's very difficult to duplicate, because hospitality requires service. It requires energy. It requires the right mindset, the right people. And unless you literally take all of those things and clone them, you're not going to be able to do exactly
Right.
as is, and then it just becomes a different experience.
Totally.
It's not to say that it's not going to be good or great or whatever. It's just going to be a different experience than Drybar. But in my opinion, I think that those people that are copycatting or those people that were doing that just proves that you were the leader, right? Like you're the person that they turn to. So as long as other customers know that and they do, they're like, oh, that's another Drybar.
Yeah.
Right? They're just called something else, dry whatever.
Bar.
Yeah, whatever, And they're still out there, but it's like the customers aren't stupid, right? Consumers know this stuff.
And we experienced that a lot because I remember, again, feeling like very like, oh shit, a lot of other people are copying us.
Right.
It's going to hurt us. And what we heard time and time again, which was so gratifying. It was like we were so busy that we were, it was hard to get appointments at Drybar because there weren't that many. And so they'd inevitably go to a copycat. And we'd always hear, yeah, I don't know, I didn't love it. And it was like, I know why you didn't like it, because the lighting wasn't right, the music wasn't right, the stylist wasn't trained right, the customer service, I know why. They,
Right.
some clients know and some clients don't, but
Sure.
they knew, and I agree, they're very, like, the consumer is very smart, and it's like they knew this is not the Drybar experience. And oh my God, we spent so much money on those early days on like cease and desist letters, which
Right.
was like not budgeted for. I mean, we spent so much money on legal fees because people were opening places calling them Drybar, and we're like,
Wow.
it's like the Kleenex
Right.
model. It's like
Right,
everyone was just like, and it's still, and on like, yeah, on some level it's kind of cool that it's like it is that, but it was like no. What was bad, it was the confusion in the marketplace. And it's like someone thought it was a Drybar, they went in and they were like meh, and we're like, it wasn't us,
Drybar sucks.
Yeah, there was a lot of that in the early days. Yeah.
How did you, obviously Drybar grew very fast. It was in the first probably few months, you guys had like another location that you were already working
Within
on.
6 months, yeah.
Yeah, and so you kept, growing. At what point did you guys decide this is like way beyond us? Like something needs to happen. We're obviously moving very fast. I can't have 10 Alli Webbs. We can't have 10 Michaels.
Yeah.
Like, what did you guys do?
Well, it was really Michael. We were so in the trenches. We opened the second store 6 months later, which by the way, now, saying now 6 months doesn't seem like very long, but it seemed like a lifetime because we were so busy at the Brentwood shop that we were like, oh my God, we need more chairs. The Brentwood shop was only 8 chairs, and business was just on fire. And Michael was like, we're going to have to hire people to help us, and I was like, okay. And, and so we started hiring people little by little. And then I think it was like when we got to maybe like 6 or 7 stores, which at that point we were still like doing it completely on our own. We had hired like 1 or 2 people, but Michael and I were very much at the helm. And I remember Michael was, interviewing this woman who had like been the president of Pinkberry. And I was like, and when I found out like what her salary requirement was, I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, we're not paying ourselves. I think for years I like paid myself, like 30 grand was what I was like for years. That was my salary. And when this woman came along and I was like, I don't even think I'd ever heard of a salary that big. I was so like, no way, Michael, what are you talking about? But he was like, Alli, if we want to grow and scale this thing, we need to hire people who know how to grow and scale a business, because that, at 6 stores, which now compared to 150 doesn't seem like much, but that's like 30 to 40 employees per shop.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. It's a lot of blowouts. It's a lot of payroll. It's a lot of issues. And, we had hired managers for all the stores, and we were kind of, we might have even had maybe 1 district manager at that point, which I could manage that. That wasn't that bad. But it was like, if we're going to grow this thing, and we're going to grow this thing, we need people who are smarter than us, who know how to scale. And that was, really largely Michael talking to, lots of other business owners and getting that advice. And I think it was like Michael and I were on a podcast together, an interview together, and he talked about how he got that advice from somebody. And I was like, oh, I thought you just came up with that, But just like this, it's like you learn these things from like, talking to other people and whatever. And
Sure.
And I talk about it all the time. It's like, hire people who are smarter than you and know more than you to help you get to that next level. And, not everybody was a fit. And, there was like a lot of trial and error. And it's like, you're also, as a founder, you're starting to like relinquish certain things to this person, and that's really not fun. And that was very, very hard for me, and it continued to be hard for the next like, however many years, like allowing other people to come in and make decisions. And it was a really interesting like learning and growing process. But yeah, I mean, you definitely need other people who know how to do the things that you don't.
Did you guys ever franchise?
Yeah, we did. And I didn't actually want to franchise. Michael wanted to early on because he was like, listen, this is a way to get us, start really putting our, getting our footprint out there. And it was also like there was all these other competitors opening, and it was like we were kind
of like a land grab. Like
it was like we needed to rush to market, and I was like, man, I don't want to franchise. I'm afraid someone's going to mess up the brand, and they're not going to do it the way we want them to do it. And that was when I kind of started to learn that there's a lot of ways to do things right, but there's like one way we do it, and we ended up like, at the handful of franchisees of like people that we really trusted in. We were really picky about it, and we hired great people, but we partnered with great people. And even some of those franchisees, I remember like walking into a store and like seeing things and being like, oh my God, what? Like, why are you doing that? That's not how it should be. And I would like, it would drive me crazy. And there was a lot of like growing pains in that and learning how to do that. But yeah, I mean, I would say of like, the 150 stores, I don't know, something like 70 of them are franchised. So a lot of them are, yeah. And then we held on to like LA, New York, like the big metropolitan cities, and we franchised smaller cities that we weren't going to have as big of a footprint in.
Sure. At what point did you decide to launch like your own products? Like besides just having your stores, like having more of like a product distribution?
Well, I mean, that was really hard too. And I knew early on that I wanted to do my own product line because we were using products from like these other lines, and they didn't like really work together well, and I didn't like the way it looked, and it's just so many things I didn't like about it. But I had no idea, like, how do you do a product line? Like, I had no idea. Even though I'd been in the industry forever, I was like, I don't really even know where to start. And I did try. And the first thing I did like on my own was our shower cap, which is still our same shower cap all these years later. But it wasn't until Castanea came in, which was our private equity partner, and they invested, I think their first round was like $21 million. And with Castanea, Janet Gerwich was a partner in Castanea, and she was the founder of Laura Mercier Cosmetics, which you guys may or may not know. But
definitely heard of it.
Yeah, they were pretty big company. And at that time, we were kind of starting to be courted by like L'Oreal and Living Proof to do like a co-branded product line, which was very enticing. And I was like, oh, and I'd like, that felt really cool. And then we had like, we met and like with the president of L'Oreal, like I was like, so cool. But Janet was like, listen, because we were still like figuring out if Castanea was going to be our partner or not. And she's like, even if you don't take our money, don't do a co-branded product line, do it yourself. You'll have total control of it. You'll make more money and blah, blah. And so we did end up taking the investment from Castanea, and Janet was part of that. And a big reason why, I mean, Janet introduced me to all the best labs and packaging, and we hired this consultant that really helped us like navigate that. And, and that was like, very quickly became a business within a business, and was like, oh my God, we're going to launch this new thing. And holy shit, what if people don't like it? And it was like, it was literally a business within a business. And we ended up, partnering with Sephora, and Sephora was involved kind of helping us, like what we used to call in the kitchen meetings with them, and saying we would present them with like what we were doing. And they knew more about the consumer space when it came to hair. And they would say, no, you can't really call it that. And from our like research and data, you can't do this and do that. So we, went back to the drawing board several times, and then we did like, I think they have like 400 locations or something. And we did a test in 75 doors. And of course we put them in our Drybars, but at that point we only had like maybe like 11 or 12 Drybars. And it was like, off to the races, and the product line did really well. And then
I think it was like a couple of years ago where you sold the product line. And then if I think I read correctly, it was like last year-ish where you sold the franchise side of the business.
Yeah.
What ultimately ended up happening, like almost like a decade of running this, like what sort of happened?
So right before the world fell apart, I'm talking weeks, if that, maybe 2 weeks. It was crazy timing. We sold the product division.
I remember that.
To Helen of Troy, which was just insane.
Are they like a USC affiliated company? I mean, like Helen of Troy sounds very
I don't know,
SC-like.
but they're a big company,
Okay,
and they do a lot of like
CPG?
appliances. No, like appliances and
Interesting.
so they also do hot tools, which is like in the industry, the big curling
Straighteners and
irons,
stuff,
which is it stands for Helen of Troy. And anyways, so they bought us, which was like really amazing timing, and then we still had the stores. It was a really complicated deal. And then then the pandemic hit, and so for the last like year or so, it's obviously been really, really challenging. And long story short, we were like, we had made some money from that, and that was like meant to go do other things in Drybar, and then that ended up just like we used that money to keep the business afloat for the year, which got very like down to the wire, which is why we ended up doing the deal with WellBiz. So WellBiz is like a franchise kind of organization, and they own lots of different brands that are completely franchised. So now they kind of own all the Drybar franchisees, all the people who own our partners that have Drybar franchisees now like roll up into WellBiz, and so do we. So we still own all the like non-franchised, or before the sale, all the non-franchised shops, which is like LA, New York. And we are the biggest like franchisee that is also kind of rolls up into WellBiz now. So it's an interesting thing, but we kind of had to do it, to keep it.
Are things opening back up?
Yeah, I mean, business is really coming back very strong, which we knew it would. Knock on wood. I mean,
more
people
events
are
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't opened all of the stores yet. We're kind of slowly getting there, but
I know I was at Glendale the other day, and I was like, why isn't this open yet?
Yeah.
All the Armenian people are gonna come in there. And just,
they're all coming back online soon, but we've had to do it like kind of in tranches, and So and but even before all of that, my involvement and we had hired a professional CEO years ago, and then we had a new CEO, and it was like, my day to day stopped years ago, and and then it just kind of became, I was doing like, still consulting on product and doing press and stuff like that, but not.
I know you mentioned you sort of struggled with like having to relinquish some like, power in the company. Like, was that time difficult when you sort of realized like my day to day isn't what it used to be, and now I just have to either figure a place out for myself at this company, or I have to move on and do other things? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a very slow progression. It didn't happen all at once, and it did start to be like, okay, like I'm gonna, kind of start stepping further and further back, and that's really what happened over the last like 3 or 4 years. Is I just started to take a step back and, not do as much as I used to do, and I think that I just got to the point where I felt like good about that. I had other projects that I wanted to work on. We wanted to launch Squeeze. I have a couple of like kind of personal projects that I wanted to do, and I felt like it was it was kind of a decision that it was a lot of things happening at once, but I just felt like I had kind of done what I needed to do with this, and it wasn't like I wasn't running it anymore. It just was a different, kind of a different business. I mean, it's like will always be my legacy and always, my baby on some level. But yeah, it was just kind of time to start doing and exploring other things, which, now I'm in the throes of.
Yeah.
Well, if the next decade is anything like 100 years ago after the Spanish flu, and it is like, the roaring 20s where people are just gonna be like, fuck it, we're going like crazy. Yeah. I mean, Drybar it probably will just explode even to bigger and better heights, right? But kind of just moving on from Drybar, because I know a lot of people could just Google it and find out and learn more about Drybar, but you kind of move forward and you're launching Squeeze and Quill and Becket and all these other projects. Were these ideas that were brewing for the last few years and you were just like, okay, it's time to get this going? I mean, how did all this come about? Did you take a break? I mean, what happened?
No, I don't think I've ever taken a break. But Michael and I had really been like noodling on this massage concept because it was so much like it was such a similar opportunity of Drybar. It was like there's two bad choices out in the marketplace. It was like for massages, it was like spas that charge a ton of money or discount chain, which is really what Drybar did too. And we always wanted to do it, but we couldn't do it when we were in Drybar, like really in heavy in Drybar. And I remember when Michael really wanted to do it, and I was like, I don't know if I can do it again from scratch, and Brittany Driscoll, who was running our marketing department at Drybar, she was like getting ready to like move on and try something new. And she loves like building businesses. And, Michael and I were like, hey, would you be interested in like running this company that we want to do? We just can't run it, for partially because we were still very, much in Drybar, and also because like, I was like, I don't want to start over from scratch like that again with that kind of like level of a business. And she did, and she wanted to do it. So, and she's amazing, and you guys should have her on too. I mean, we're so opposite. I mean, she's like very data driven and very like organized, and she's like a marketing executive for many years, but we knew she had this like entrepreneurial spirit, and we knew that she would really kill it. And then she had the experience of like helping us grow Drybar. I don't remember how many. I think she came in when we were maybe around like 30 stores and really helped us grow it quite a bit. Anyway, so Brittany, we were like, we will be your advisors and we investors, but you're going to do this. And she, relished the opportunity, and she did it. So, again, and now I'm in this point, and then, similar to OK Humans, we had this girl, Christy, who approached Brittany and I about this concept for, kind of like the Drybar of therapy, or again, creating an experience around therapy and creating a nicer space and an easier way to book and all of that. And it's like, again, let's create this great experience and use all our resources. And we've now formed this company called the Feel Good Company, which has Squeeze, OK Humans, and then another business we're launching, which we haven't launched yet, so I can't tell you. But that's going to be under that umbrella. Becket Quill is kind of my little passion project on the side that's not in that. But yeah, so it was like we just those businesses don't take up my time the way like starting and growing Drybar did. But, I'm in this really kind of fun and new, position where I'm more of like an advisor and investor now. And, I have my hands in so many different projects. And, obviously like, Becket Quill is another thing that I'm doing, and I'm working on a book, and I'm working on a television show, and I'm working on like all these different projects. And who knows what, it's kind of like throwing a lot of things at the wall now to kind of feel like what my next 10 years will be like. And true to like, my early days, like I'm kind of just doing what I'm excited about. I love jewelry so much. And I came across this woman, Meredith Quill, who was making jewelry and at a fraction of the price of what it looked like. And I was like, man, if we wrapped a brand around this and got a better website and got some attention to it, I think we could like really we could have a really great little business here. And so I'm just doing it because it's fun, and I'm kind of following that same roadmap of like, let me just keep doing what is fun and exciting for me.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about, and we can go as deep as you want in this, and we could keep it at the surface too, but, we hear a lot of advice for people like, to not, let's say, start a business with their friends, right? But you did it with your brother and your husband at the time. What advice do you have from your experience on how whatever impact that had on your life in terms of starting a business? Because naturally, like you're just with the people in your family, your friends, or whatever all the time. So if you have an idea, you might talk about it with your friends or family, and eventually think about starting a business together. Like, do you have any thoughts to share, I guess, on that?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of people thought we were crazy for all working together. It was like my brother, my ex-husband, and I. That's not why we got divorced. Although it makes a good story, but it's it's not. It's other stuff. Yeah. But I think that Michael and I were always close as kids, but and then as we got older, we went our separate ways. We got married, and we didn't see each other that much. And Drybar actually like became this like place for us to be like close again. And we, granted, we kind of revert back to little kids when we're together, and like we used to have to get separated in board meetings because we were like being really silly, and Michael would do like stupid shit that would make me laugh, and it was like but it was fun, and we shared an office for a long time together too, which is really just because it was fun and we liked hanging out together, and we would learn things. Like he'd learn so much about hair, and I'd learned about business, and it was this great way to be together.
Who learned more about what?
I don't know. He knows a lot about hair. Probably.
Like, can he?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he could do hair, but he knows more than like your typical straight guy,
Okay.
But anyway, and sometimes I would hear him on the phone, and he'd get off, and I'd be like, "Wait, what was that?" And he'd explain it to me, or vice versa. So it was a really cool thing, and it really like enabled us to actually be around each other and see each other, and we liked that, and we liked working together, but. The reason I think it worked was, like I mentioned earlier, was like I knew hair and he didn't. He knew business and I didn't. So we were constantly learning from each other, and we weren't. And it was just, and with like Cam, my ex-husband, he knew like the creative side. So everybody had their lanes.
Not too much opportunity to like step on each other's toes.
Yeah, it was like very clearly defined what everyone's like strengths and weaknesses were, and so there wasn't like a lot of stepping on toes. And I would say that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give anybody going into business with anybody is like, who's doing what? If everybody like wants to be like the star, and like we knew that like I was going to be the face of this brand because it was my idea, and it was like I was a mom and a hairstylist, and like when my brother and Cam were bald, it was like that doesn't make sense. It was like it made the most sense on many levels to put me out there as like the front person, and that just. And so
you could spin the ball thing in terms of like saying like, I wish I had that hair. So like, let's keep it nice,
Well, but that's the thing. It's like, figuring out what everybody's role is and being really clear about that. And what's interesting now is like with Meredith, my partner, Becket Quill, she's the jewelry designer. And it's an interesting partnership because I'm, more well known than her because of what I done, and she's a designer, and she's kind of the talent now in this situation, and I put up the money, and she has sweat equity, which is also kind of fun and full circle based on like where I started with my brother. But it's like her job in this partnership is like she makes the jewelry, she comes up with ideas, and then she bounces it off of me. But I'm like really helping like fuel this business forward. And it's like it's very clear. I'm not trying to make jewelry. I'm not trying to like micromanage her. It's like that's what she does. And I think that's like and we were friendly before, but we didn't know each other. We basically spent like a year getting to know each other before we decided to really take the plunge and do this, which was an important year. But I think that's the thing. It's like make sure everybody's very clear on what they do and what they do well and what they don't do well. And there's just things that like Meredith isn't good at that I'm like, we're like, you shouldn't be doing that. And she's like, yeah, no, you're right. I shouldn't, and like, I'm not going to be making jewelry. And those are very, very important conversations to have up front. And if you end up in business with somebody and you guys both kind of have the same skill set, then that's like a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
And obviously self-awareness is a big trait for founders and entrepreneurs, for anybody really, but it is really important if you're sort of building something to be able to, I guess, make it successful. And so you mentioned, having this sort of ignorance is bliss thing back then when you were first starting Drybar, like not really knowing what's possible, right? Like, let's just open up one location and I'll be happy if it does well. You don't know it's going to blow up. Literally. And so I guess in this case now, and with starting a new business and kind of going back to that stage, but now so much, now you know what's possible. Like, how do you sort of, I guess, talk to yourself in terms of as a founder again, like of a new business? What are the things that you're telling yourself, and how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I've learned a lot from the Drybar years, and I think that has really like uniquely prepared me for like all this other stuff. And it's like even now in all of my new businesses, like I made so many great relationships and so much networking and respect from people that I'm like, I utilize all of that stuff and all of those learnings and all, in all of our businesses, to look back and figure out like things to do differently and what we did right and what we did wrong. I think it's largely like why Brittany, who's my co-founder of Squeeze and CEO of Squeeze, it's like she has the knowledge of like what worked in Drybar and what didn't. And we largely use that, to inform our businesses now, and make sure that we're like not making the same mistakes that we made back then.
Yeah.
I mean, after achieving this success with Drybar and kind of being at this point in your life, what are the things that make you genuinely happy? Like, what are the things that genuinely excite you? And when you wake up and you're going about your day, I mean, what are those things? I mean, what are the things that run through your head? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good question. It's like, obviously, like I've had a lot of, well, not obviously, but I've had a lot of personal like growth over the last 3 or 4 years, having gone through a divorce, and I'm on like kind of the other side of that now. So, I mean, I think I really value like, finding love again. And and I think that's like a really big deal for me, but also like, which I think has always been there for me. It's like opportunity. Like I feel really lucky that really lucky, and feel so like, I wish I could think of a better word than lucky, but like, the opportunities that come to me still all the time, it's so cool. And it's like always like, I love creating things, and I love creating those opportunities, and I love coming up with ideas. And it's like my brain is just kind of always like, I'm such a like problem solver, figure it out kind of brain, where I'm like, what else can we do? And what can we do with this? And what can we do that? And I love that. And I get really excited, about that. We just had this morning, like a touch base of like some ideas that we have with Becket and Quill, and even like, Adrian's working on this thing that we're doing at the end of the month in Austin. And I like figuring out how to like make something bigger and create something else around something, and I think that, creating opportunity, having opportunities, like I really love all that stuff. And it's, it feels like to me, which again is what I feel so grateful for, is that like I get a lot of those opportunities come my way, and I create a lot of them too. And I think that's what kind of is exciting for me now. And it's like, and I remember feeling like that with Drybar, once we started to see some real success, and I would get like these crazy opportunities. Like when someone called me up and asked me to be a guest shark on Shark Tank, I was like, really? And it was so exciting. And then like being on the cover of a magazine, I mean, just so many. And I also remember when like I got a call that like Vogue was sending somebody in to do a blowout in the early days. And I was like, Vogue? Then there's, I mean, if I were to sit here and tell you how many times things like that have happened, which like to some people would be a big deal and some people wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think that's like what gets me like the most excited is like, what's around the corner. And there's always like something new and fun around the corner. Some things come my way and some things I create. But I love that like creativeness that happens.
When you were that little girl in, South Florida, I mean, could you have ever imagined this?
No. And if you were to talk to my mom passed away a couple of years ago, but my dad, it's like, and even my mom was alive. It was like, they were like, I mean, still, like probably a month ago, my dad's like, who knew? Little Alli. It's still this like thing in my family of like, we never would have imagined, And I really, like I mentioned, I really was this like, I mean, it's so different who I was then to who I ultimately became, which I think is really shocking. And like my dad gets such a kick out of it that like, he's like, I just, like when I tell him what like people offer me to come and speak at something, he's like, no way. I'm like, I know, I can't believe it either, but it's true. It's like, it's just so funny, and awesome. And, and I really like to like, give back. Like I will do an interview with any like high school or college student, and I get asked a lot to do that. And it's like when I was, growing up, there wasn't a lot of like female entrepreneurs and obviously like there's so many now and it's so awesome. But, so I like to really try to give back in as many ways as I can, to help like form the next generation.
It's just, your story is just a great testament to, every kid that is now no longer a kid, and or every kid now that where they are in the present moment doesn't mean they're going to end up that way, whether they were born into a family that doesn't have wealth or does, or they have several different jobs and they're confused about their life, and then they're 30 years old and then finally they're like, oh shit, here's an idea and I'm going to pursue it.
Yeah.
Right. You just can't
You don't
predict
know when
those
it's
things.
gonna
You just
come.
don't know when it's going to come. You don't know when it's going to hit you. You know, it's like,
Yeah, I mean, we just started
sometimes you don't
Drybar
know. You could
till
be driving and you're like, wait, you know, and
Totally.
have that moment and you're like, I'm just going to do it. And you built up that muscle.
Yeah.
Right. I think the key is build that muscle like through your life, like focus on just building experiences if you can.
Yeah, and I think it's like paying attention. And you know, I was 35 when we started Drybar. I was like, and I wasn't like unhappy in my life, and I wasn't like waiting for that big thing. Like the way my life turned out, you know, is like amazing, and I feel really lucky for it. But I wasn't like unhappy where my life was before that. I was just, I mean, I knew that I wanted to keep doing more, and I'm still like that. I want to keep doing more, and I'm doing other things, and I'm, you know, excited, and who knows what will become, what's around the next corner.
Right.
And that, I love that. Like I love kind of not knowing and just kind of like keeping down the path of what I love and seeing what comes of it.
It's just crazy to think back in like Drybar is like 10, 11 years old. You know, it's like, that's
crazy.
it. Like, that's all that it took. Like, and you're like, oh shit, a decade passed by so fast.
It really
feels like
did.
100 years.
But then you look back and you're like, I just built Drybar. You know, it's like, how wild is that? Like,
Well, and I remember like walking in New York City was years ago, you know, obviously pre-pandemic. And I remember like, I love to walk when I'm in New York, and I lived in New York for so long. And I remember like I walked across the city. It was like a long walk. And I think I had passed like 2 or 3 Drybars. And I was like, holy, those are mine. Like, that is so weird, you know, and they were packed. And yeah, it's a trip. I mean, it's such a trip that it's like, you know, and sometimes it's like, oh, some people haven't heard of Drybar and whatever. I remember like in my mind, I like compared it to like Nordstrom. I'm like, everybody just knows what Nordstrom is, and that's really cool. I'm like, you know, we have more, I think we have more locations actually than Nordstrom. And it's and it's like, it's just, it's all very surreal. It really is surreal. And yeah. And I, you know, it's, and like I said, it was definitely a little bit of luck, but a lot of like kind of the stars aligning and a lot of hard work and execution. And Michael used to always say, this is ours to mess up. You know, it's like, that was part of why we started hiring people. Cause it was like, we could implode and we could really fuck this thing up if we don't like do it right. You know, it's like, how do we do it? Make sure we do it right.
Sure.
So.
Well, I'm sure we could sit here and talk for hours, but you know, obviously your story is incredible, and I hope that those that are listening, they just keep doing what they're doing, and that they're just authentic, and they do things that they enjoy and that truly excites them. And I think that one day, if it's meant to be, it'll be. If it's not meant to be, then it's okay. Like, I think the one lesson that we both learned is that not every through this podcast, we're like 200 episodes, I think, in at this point. I mean, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be successful.
Totally.
I mean, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be happy. You probably will be happier if you're not an entrepreneur. You're probably a lot more successful at times if you're not an entrepreneur. But it just happens. Like you can't force it. And those that do don't end up on this show.
Yeah, so. You really can't force it, you know. And so, you know, I mean, I mentioned, I was an assistant in a lot of different realms in my life, and I liked being like the number 2. I liked that role, you know, and then it ended up changing one day, you know. So
I think the key is like to be ambitious, but don't tie your happiness to some sort of end result.
Yeah.
Like, and just, I mean, it's cliche, but like enjoy the journey. Like, even if I don't want to say even if it doesn't work out that way, like, you know, you're still going to be happy because you want to be ambitious and never sort of settle. But I guess you want to tie your happiness to different things.
Well,
just
I think
even
it's like,
even having the privilege to be ambitious and to go after your dreams is huge.
I mean, it's like trust your path, you know, and that's always like that's always what comes up for me. It's like, just keep doing what you love, keep trying. And then if you know, if you're like, you know, and there's a lot of jobs I didn't like doing, and there was jobs that I didn't get, and things that I wish that I got that I didn't get. And it was like, it was all part of it. Obviously, you know, hindsight is 20/20, but it is like part of the journey. Like, just keep on at it, you know.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Alli.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys. This is fun.